We're about to take you on a journey through 13 inventions from the Roaring Twenties that revolutionized everything from how we eat to how we communicate. Number 1. Band-Aid. Imagine you're in the kitchen cooking up a storm. Suddenly, you slice your finger on a sharp knife. Ouch! Back in 1920, this scenario was all too familiar for Josephine Dixon. She was constantly getting cuts and burns while preparing meals. Her husband, Earl, an employee at Johnson & Johnson, was tired of struggling to bandage her wounds. One day, Earl had a brilliant idea. He took a strip of adhesive tape and stuck a small piece of gauze in the center. Voila! The first Band-Aid was born. It was easy to apply, stayed in place, and protected the wound. Johnson & Johnson loved Earl's invention and started mass-producing Band-Aids in 1924. This simple strip of sticky tape and gauze changed home first aid forever. No more fumbling with loose bandages or worrying about dirt getting into cuts. But Band-Aids were just the beginning of the 1920s medical revolution. Up next, we'll explore how a groundbreaking discovery transformed the lives of millions living with a deadly disease. Number 2. Insulin injection. While Band-Aids were revolutionizing home care, a far deadlier problem loomed. Imagine a disease so cruel it turned sugar into poison, wasting away children and adults alike. In 1920, a diagnosis of diabetes was practically a death sentence. But one doctor's wild hunch was about to change everything. Enter Frederick Banting, a young Canadian doctor with a burning desire to conquer diabetes. His eureka moment came in 1920 when he scribbled down an idea about isolating something special from a dog's pancreas. It sounds bizarre, but stick with us. This hunch was pure gold. Banting's road wasn't easy. Many doubted him, but he found an ally in J.J.R. McLeod, who gave him a lab to work in. There, Banting and his team worked tirelessly, experimenting on dogs to extract what we now know as insulin. The big test came on January 11, 1922. 14-year-old Leonard Thompson, deathly ill with diabetes, received the first human injection of insulin. At first, things looked dicey. Leonard had a bad reaction. But Banting didn't give up. He refined the insulin and 12 days later, tried again. This time, it was like magic. Leonard woke up from his diabetic coma, snatched from the jaws of death. Word spread like wildfire, and soon, insulin was saving lives left and right. By the mid-1920s, what was once a death sentence became a manageable condition. Number 3. Traffic light. Picture this. You're standing at a busy intersection in 1920, cars zooming by with no rhyme or reason, pedestrians dodging vehicles left and right. It's utter mayhem. Now, fast forward just a few years. What single invention transformed this dangerous free-for-all into the organized dance of traffic we know today? The answer might surprise you, and it all started with one man's brilliant observation. Before traffic signals, city streets were a chaotic mess. Pedestrians and vehicles often collided, and crossing the road was like playing a real-life game of Frogger. Inventors scrambled to find a solution, but it was Garrett Morgan who really hit the nail on the head. His 3-position signal was a game-changer. Morgan's design was simple but effective. It added a warning position between stop and go, giving drivers and pedestrians time to clear the intersection. This idea was so good that General Electric bought it for a whopping $40,000. That's like winning the lottery back then. In 1923, Cleveland, Ohio became the first city to install Morgan's traffic signal. At first, people weren't sure what to make of it. Some drivers even ignored the lights altogether. But as folks got used to the new system, something amazing happened. Accidents at intersections dropped by up to 40%. Number 4. Movie camera with sound. The Roaring Twenties were about to get a whole lot louder. As traffic signals brought order to the streets, another invention was poised to shatter the silence in movie theaters across America. But here's the catch. This technological leap forward nearly spelled disaster for some of Hollywood's biggest stars. What made the transition to talkies so treacherous for actors and directors alike? Before 1927, movies were a silent affair. Actors exaggerated their gestures and title cards filled in the dialogue. But behind the scenes, inventors were racing to give films a voice. The breakthrough came with The Jazz Singer, the first successful synchronized sound film. Suddenly, Al Jolson's voice boomed through theaters, leaving audiences stunned. But this new technology brought huge challenges. Noisy film cameras had to be enclosed in soundproof booths. Actors struggled to adapt their performances for microphones that couldn't move. Some stars found their careers in jeopardy when audiences heard their voices for the first time. Despite the hurdles, talkies revolutionized cinema. Attendance soared as people flocked to hear their favorite stars speak. The Moviola, a new editing machine, allowed filmmakers to perfect their sound. By the early 1930s, silent films were a thing of the past. Number 5. Frozen food process. From the silver screen to the freezer aisle, the 1920s were full of surprises. But what if I told you that fish caught by indigenous people in the Arctic would lead to a breakthrough that changed American eating habits forever? Get ready for a chilling tale of culinary innovation. Before Clarence Birdseye came along, preserving food was a real headache. Canning and salting were common, but they often left food tasting, well, not so great. Then Birdseye, a naturalist with a curious mind, noticed something interesting while in Labrador. The Inuit people there had a knack for keeping fish fresh in the freezing cold. This observation sparked an idea. Birdseye started experimenting with quick freezing techniques, and by 1930, he had patented a method that would revolutionize how we eat. His flash freezing process kept food tasting fresh and maintained its texture, unlike the slow freezing methods of the time. At first, people were skeptical. Frozen fish sticks? No thanks. But soon, products like frozen peas became kitchen staples. Birdseye's invention didn't just change what we eat, it transformed how we shop and cook. Suddenly, we could buy food in bulk without worrying about it spoiling. Number 6. Television. You've heard of the space race, but what about the race to bring moving pictures into American homes? It was a sprint to the finish line with unexpected twists and turns. Who would cross first, and at what cost? Back in the 1920s, home entertainment meant gathering around the radio or phonograph. But a handful of inventors had bigger dreams. They wanted to transmit moving images right into your living room. Can you imagine how wild that idea seemed back then? John Logie Baird and Charles Francis Jenkins were among the first to show off their mechanical television systems. Baird even managed to transmit the first live image of a human face. But the real game changers were the iconoscope and kinescope. These electronic marvels, developed by Vladimir Zworykin, would pave the way for practical TV cameras and displays. In 1928, W2XBS, later known as NBC, started regular broadcasts. Sure, there were only a few thousand TV sets out there, but it was a start. People were amazed when they saw the first public demonstrations. Families huddled around tiny screens, catching glimpses of a future where moving pictures would be beamed right into their homes. TV's rise wasn't an overnight sensation. It took years for the technology to improve and become affordable. But those early pioneers laid the groundwork for a revolution that would change how we entertain ourselves forever. Number 7. Electric blender. Ever wondered how your great-grandparents made milkshakes without burning out their arms? Prepare to be whisked away by the story of an invention that revolutionized kitchens across America. This whirlwind tale of culinary innovation might just leave you in a spin. Before the electric blender, making smooth sauces or creamy drinks was a real workout. Cooks would spend ages whisking, grinding, and mashing ingredients by hand. But in 1922, a man named Stephen Poplawski had a brilliant idea that would change everything. Poplawski created the first electric blender, initially designed for making milkshakes and malts. Can you imagine the excitement when people realized they could make a perfect shake with the push of a button? As word spread, so did the blender's uses. By 1932, Poplawski had improved his invention to handle fruits and vegetables too. Suddenly, Kitchens across America were humming with the sound of blenders. Cookbooks started featuring recipes for blended drinks, soups, and sauces. The humble blender didn't just make cooking easier, it changed how we eat. Smoothies became a health food craze, and quick blended meals fit perfectly into the fast-paced lifestyle of the Roaring Twenties. Number 8. Electric washing machine. Ever wondered why your great-grandma's arms were so buff? Turns out, doing laundry used to be a full-body workout. But in the 1920s, a new invention promised to change all that. Let's dive into the sudsy story of how one machine transformed Monday mornings and shook up society. Before electric washing machines, laundry day was a real chore. Imagine hauling heavy buckets of water, scrubbing clothes on washboards, and wringing them out by hand. It was exhausting work that could take an entire day. Early washing machines tried to make things easier, but they often broke down or didn't clean clothes very well. Then came the game changer, fully automatic electric washers. These machines could wash, rinse, and spin clothes without any help. People were amazed. Suddenly, a task that used to take all day could be done in just a couple of hours. Women reported having more time for other activities like joining clubs or even getting jobs outside the home. But not everyone was thrilled at first. Some folks worried about using electricity near water, and others thought the machines were too complicated. Despite these concerns, electric washers quickly caught on. By the late 1920s, they were saving households about half the time they used to spend on laundry. Number 9. Penicillin. What if I told you that millions of lives were saved because someone forgot to clean up before vacation? It sounds too good to be true, but that's exactly how one of the most important medical discoveries of the 20th century came about. Before 1928, a simple infection could be a death sentence. Doctors had few weapons against bacteria, and many patients died from what we now consider minor ailments. But that all changed when Alexander Fleming returned from vacation to find his lab in a state of disarray. Fleming noticed something odd in one of his petri dishes. A mold had contaminated his bacteria samples, but instead of just tossing it out, he took a closer look. To his amazement, the area around the mold was clear of bacteria. This accidental discovery led Fleming to isolate what he called mold juice, later renamed penicillin. Despite its potential, penicillin faced a rocky road to widespread use. Fleming struggled to produce it in large quantities, and it took years for the medical community to recognize its importance. It wasn't until World War II that penicillin production ramped up, saving countless soldiers' lives. The impact of penicillin was staggering. Diseases that were once deadly became treatable. The mortality rate for pneumonia, for example, dropped from 30% to just 5%. Penicillin paved the way for other antibiotics, ushering in a new era of medicine. Number 10. Jet engine theory. Imagine a world where planes struggled to reach 20,000 feet and 200 mph was considered breakneck speed. Welcome to aviation in the 1920s, where one visionary dared to dream beyond these limits. Enter Frank Whittle, a young English pilot with an idea so revolutionary it would redefine the future of flight. Whittle believed that piston engines couldn't meet the demands of future aviation. His solution? A completely new type of propulsion, the turbojet engine. In 1930, he filed his first patent, but his concepts were met with skepticism. Many experts thought existing engines were good enough, and the military showed little interest in funding his wild ideas. But Whittle refused to give up. He spent years refining his designs, facing technical challenges and financial struggles. Little did the doubters know, his persistence would lay the foundation for the jet age. Whittle's work, along with competing concepts from other innovators, sparked a global race to harness the power of jet propulsion.